Real diamonds worth $300,000 each were placed on the nose cones. 7 of the weirdest one-off F1 race liveries. It's fair to say modern-day F1 cars don't usually have the wow factor when it comes to a completely weird and wacky livery. The closest we normally get to that these days are one-off testing liveries. But if we look back a few years, there were some crazy designs which really drew attention to certain cars, whether that was down to a sponsor deal, a celebration, or a commemoration. They often became incredibly memorable for reasons good or bad. We've used the term one-off quite loosely, as some of these liveries used a couple of times were too good not to include. McLaren MP42C, 1986. The Marlboro McLaren is one of the most iconic liveries in F1 history, with its simple red and white stripes remaining unchanged since 1981. Well, apart from one race. At the 1986 Portuguese Grand Prix, Marlboro wanted to promote its new gold brand of cigarettes. Therefore, the red on Keke Rosberg's car was changed to yellow, resulting in the unusual sight of a yellow and white McLaren. In fact, it's such an odd sight that it looks more like a faded photo than an actual yellow McLaren. It didn't do Keke much good in the race either. He retired from 5th place with electrical failure just past half distance. Ligier JS39, 1993. From the team's first F1 race in 1976 to its very last in 1996, Ligier liveries were largely the same. Blue, white and predominantly sponsored by French cigarette brand, Gitanes. Though they were replaced by Gauloise in 1996. How's my pronunciation? Even a departure into a special one-off colour scheme stuck to that same formula. For the last 2 races in 1993, which I guess technically makes it a 2-off livery, Martin Brundle's car was decked out in a special livery. The design took the term title sponsor to a whole new level by essentially ditching all the other logos on the car and adding an oversized Gitanes logo across the length of the car, complete with the logo of a dancing woman. Gitane means gypsy woman in French. The result was this delightfully abstract mixture of geometric shapes and colour patches. It was different, but still very obviously a Ligier. Ferrari 158, 1964. Ferrari F1 cars should always be red, right? Well, not always. In 1964, Ferrari was embroiled in a dispute with the FIA over the homologation of its new endurance racer, the 250LM. To be allowed to race, 100 road-going examples of the car had to be built, and the story goes that the previous year, Ferrari had managed to pull the wool over the FIA's eyes by strategically moving the same group of cars around the factory when the inspectors were distracted to make it look like they had 100. The following year, the FIA had become wise to this trick after protests from rival teams and refused to sign off on the 250LM. Pretty damn angry with this, Enzo Ferrari went to the Italian motorsport governing body, the ACI, and asked them to back him up. When they refused, Enzo responded by saying that he'd never paint his cars in Rosso Corsa, the national racing colours of Italy, ever again. With 2 races in the F1 season left to go, he sent his Ferrari 158s off to North America painted in blue and white, the colours of the North American racing team, which had run Ferrari's racing efforts in America. To further add to Enzo's protest, the cars were officially entered by NART and not Ferrari. The blue and white Ferraris ended up playing a big part in F1 history too. John Surtees finished second at Watkins Glen, and then, when Graham Hill had issues and Jim Clark retired from the last race in Mexico, teammate Lorenzo Bandini allowed Surtees past into second on the final lap, enough for Surtees to clinch the championship. That not only made him the first and so far only person to win world championships on both 2 and 4 wheels, but the only person to win the title in a Ferrari that wasn't red. Ferrari eventually resolved the dispute, and the following year its cars were back painted in the familiar red. That wasn't the only time the team ran one of its cars in a different colour though. At Spa in 1961, Belgian driver Olivier Gendebien, that's probably wrong, had his shark-nosed Ferrari painted yellow. Mercedes W10, 2019. Mercedes had a ton of stuff to celebrate at the 2019 German Grand Prix. As well as being title sponsors of the race, it also coincided with the 125th anniversary of Mercedes motorsport activity. Plus, there was all the F1 success, or rather domination, of the past few years. And this was the race where they'd decided to allow Netflix Drive to Survive crew access to the team. As a result, the team decided to go with a commemorative livery, with the front of the car being painted white before peeling into silver. A nod to the, not entirely true, story of how Mercedes had to strip the white paint from its cars at the last minute before a race in the 1930s in order to meet a maximum weight limit. It wasn't just the cars that got a makeover either. Mechanics and team personnel all donned vintage clothes, with Toto Wolff dressing like the legendary Mercedes team boss Alfred Neubauer. Now, we're not saying that the special livery was cursed, but Valtteri Bottas crashed out and Lewis Hamilton spun his way to 9th, having felt sick all weekend. Ferrari F2001, 2001. The tragedy of the 11th of September attack on the Twin Towers in the USA in 2001 had far-reaching implications, to the point there was even uncertainty over whether the Italian Grand Prix, scheduled to be held 5 days later, should even go ahead. It did, but without any pre- or post-race celebrations. Several teams made adjustments to their liveries. Jordan added a large American flag to the engine cover, while Jaguar painted the airboxes black. Ferrari went a step further. The cars were stripped of every single sponsor and ran in a plain red and white livery with a black nose cone, a powerful tribute to those who lost their lives on 9/11. The Ocean's 12 Jaguar R5, 2004. At the 2004 Monaco Grand Prix, Jaguar had struck a deal to promote the upcoming Ocean's 12 movie. This meant all the usual things. The stars of the films were in and around the paddock, the drivers had special black overalls, and the normally gorgeous green livery of the Jaguar R5 sprouted red Ocean's 12 branding on the nose and engine cover. It looked like a bit of a mess, to be honest, but that's not what's interesting about it. Oh no, what makes this livery special is the fact that real diamonds worth $300,000 each were placed on the nose cones of both Mark Webber's and Christian Klean's cars. A marketing stunt which seems ludicrous whichever way you cut it. Get it? Cut it? Diamonds? Whatever. But which evidently went through enough stages of approval to actually make it onto the cars for the race. It seems the only people who didn't think it was a good idea were the insurance companies. Apparently they'd all decided not to provide cover in the instance one was damaged or went missing. Even if you've never heard the story, you know where this is going, don't you? A pair of expensive diamonds located right at the end of one of the most vulnerable pieces of an F1 car, placed on the nose cones of a pair of midfield cars around the tightest and most challenging circuit on the calendar. That's just an accident looking for somewhere to happen. And sure enough, it happened. On the first lap of the race, Klean was eliminated in a crash. By the time the team was allowed to go and recover the bits of the car at the end of the race, the diamond had gone. Whether it had become dislodged in the impact and rolled down a drain or pocketed by an opportunistic marshal, who knows? Surprisingly, the practice of putting expensive gemstones on fragile racing cars never caught on. The Star Wars Red Bull RB1 2005. An altogether more successful F1 movie tie-in came a year later, when the fun-loving Red Bull team helped promote Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith at the 2005 Monaco Grand Prix. It did little to go against the theme of special liveries negatively impacting performance, as both David Coulthard and Antonio Liuzzi crashed out, making it the first race in Red Bull Racing's history that the team didn't score points. But to be honest, who cares when the livery looks that good? And that wasn't even the coolest thing about it. That'd be the fact that the mechanics was dressed up like stormtroopers. This would be the first in a long line of Red Bull running special liveries. In 2006, again at Monaco, the cars had a Superman livery. Coulthard bucked the trend of the one-off livery curse by scoring the team's first podium, where he donned a cape on the podium. Christian Horner then jumped into the harbour wearing nothing but a cape, the result of a pre-race bet. Coulthard had another one-off livery on his car at the 2008 Brazilian Grand Prix, decked out in white to promote Red Bull's Wings for Life charity and commemorate what was to be DC's final race. Unfortunately, it only lasts 2 corners as he collided with Kazuki Nakajima's Williams. There was another Wings for Life livery in 2012, this time at the British Grand Prix. It was made up with the faces of more than 25,000 fans, each of whom had donated to the charity in order to get their photo on the car. Both cars ended up on the podium, with Mark Webber taking the last win of his career ahead of Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel. There you have it, some of the weirdest one-off liveries of all time. Have we missed out any that you'd have on this list? Let us know in the comment section below.